The Today Show studio was alive with the usual buzz of early morning excitement, but beneath the polished smiles and cheerful introductions, there was a tension in the air that hinted something unusual was about to unfold. Cameras swiveled to capture the gleaming set, the bright lights reflecting off the large windows, and the bustling crew behind the scenes moved with the precise choreography of a well-oiled machine. Yet even among the familiar motions, a sense of anticipation lingered. Reba McEntire, the legendary country singer whose career spanned decades and whose presence commanded respect, sat poised across from the hosts. She was dressed in a chic ensemble that reflected her signature style, elegant, confident, and unpretentious. Her hands rested lightly on her notes, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness, as though she already sensed that today's interview might test her patience in ways it never had before. The hosts, radiating their trademark mix of charm and professionalism, launched into the segment with practiced ease. "Reba, it's such a pleasure to have you here today," one began warmly, leaning forward with a smile. "We're thrilled to talk about your upcoming projects, your music, and everything you've been up to." Reba returned the smile, her voice calm and poised. "Thank you, I'm excited to be here and share a bit about what's coming next. It's always fun to connect with the fans through your platform." For a moment, the atmosphere seemed light, almost jovial, and the audience responded with applause. But just as the discussion seemed set to follow a routine, a subtle shift occurred. One of the hosts, sensing the opportunity for a more provocative angle, leaned in slightly, their tone sharper than before. "Reba, some people have been talking about your comments regarding recent political events. Do you feel that celebrities like yourself have a responsibility when speaking on such matters in the public eye?" Reba's expression remained measured, but there was a slight tightening around her eyes as she considered her response. She had navigated countless interviews over her career, and she knew that any misstep in phrasing could be blown out of proportion in the media. "I think everyone is entitled to their opinion," she said carefully. "I always try to speak from my heart and share my perspective honestly, but I don't want to impose my views on anyone else. Everyone interprets things differently, and I respect that." The host pressed further, their tone shifting subtly from inquisitive to challenging. "But Reba, don't you think there's a line between expressing an opinion and influencing millions of viewers in a way they might not expect? Some critics say your comments were controversial, and they're concerned about the impact on your audience." The tension in the studio became noticeable, a subtle undercurrent of unease rippling through the air. Reba's jaw tightened fractionally, and she adjusted her posture, leaning back slightly as though to create a bit of distance between herself and the probing question. "I'm not here to dictate how people should think," she replied evenly, her voice calm but firmer now. "I share my experiences, my music, and my perspective, but ultimately, it's up to each person to make their own decisions. Influence can happen naturally through honesty, but I don't aim to control anyone's thoughts." The audience responded with a low murmur, sensing the first hints of conflict. Cameras panned across the set, capturing the nuanced reactions of the co-hosts and the subtle signs of tension in Reba's demeanor. Her hands, previously resting lightly on the table, now gripped her notes a bit tighter, a clear signal that she was bracing for the next challenge. Another host, seemingly intent on pushing the narrative into more contentious territory, leaned forward with a slightly sharper tone. "Some critics argue that your comments show a disconnect with younger audiences. Do you worry that your public persona might be affecting your relevance in today's rapidly changing music industry?" Reba's eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint smirk appeared as she considered the question. "Out of touch," she repeated, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I don't think music is about chasing trends. Fans connect with honesty, with authenticity. That doesn't change just because the times change. I'm confident in who I am and the work I do, and I trust my audience appreciates that." The hosts exchanged subtle glances, recognizing that their carefully constructed line of questioning was starting to provoke more than expected. The conversation, which had begun with friendly curiosity, had escalated into a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk between professionalism and confrontation. The audience seemed to sense this, leaning forward in their seats, whispering quietly, and adjusting in anticipation of a potential escalation. The interview continued, the questions growing increasingly personal. Reba was asked about her family life, rumored disputes with other artists, and past comments that had previously stirred public debate. Each inquiry, though phrased politely, was layered with an undercurrent designed to provoke a reaction. Reba, ever the consummate professional, maintained her composure, answering each question with precision, but the subtle tightening of her shoulders and the slight pause before each response revealed the internal calculation she was making. "I've always believed in being open with my fans," she said, her voice steady but now carrying a subtle firmness. "But there's a difference between being honest and being put under a microscope. I respect my audience, and I respect myself, and I won't engage in speculation or gossip just for the sake of ratings." The hosts, sensing that the tension had reached a critical point, attempted to navigate the conversation with a mix of curiosity and challenge. "Reba, don't you think your fans deserve transparency on every aspect of your life? Isn't that part of being in the public eye?" Reba's gaze sharpened, her eyes locking on the host in a quiet but powerful warning. "There's transparency, and then there's intrusion," she said evenly but firmly. "I've been through decades of interviews, and I know where the line is. I will not be drawn into drama or personal speculation just to entertain. That's not what I'm here for, and that's not what I do." As the cameras returned from the commercial break, the atmosphere in the studio had shifted palpably. The bright smiles and rehearsed chatter of the morning show felt almost hollow in comparison to the tension that now hovered over the set. Reba McEntire sat upright in her chair, her posture rigid, exuding a quiet but undeniable authority. Her usual warmth and charm were still present, but there was a steely edge to her gaze that told the audience she was on high alert. The hosts tried to reintroduce the segment with light-hearted energy, but the earlier confrontational tone had left a lingering unease that even practiced professionalism couldn't mask. One of the hosts leaned in, attempting to steer the discussion back to Reba's music, perhaps hoping to diffuse the tension. "Reba, let's talk about your new album and tour. Fans are excited to see you back on stage. How has the preparation been?" Reba gave a polite smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "The tour's been going well. The band is incredible, the fans are amazing, and it's always a joy to perform live. Music has a way of connecting us in ways words sometimes can't, and I'm grateful for that." The host nodded, but it was clear they weren't finished. With a subtle shift in tone, they leaned closer, voice tinged with a sharper edge. "Reba, some people have criticized you for avoiding questions about your personal life, saying that as a public figure, you owe your fans more transparency. How do you respond to that?" Reba's expression tightened ever so slightly. She was no stranger to invasive questions. Her career had spanned decades of interviews, but the persistence and framing of this question carried a subtle accusation. Her voice remained calm but firm. "I understand that people are curious, and I appreciate their interest. But curiosity has limits, and there are aspects of my life that are private. I respect my fans, and I respect myself enough not to give in to speculation or gossip." The audience murmured, sensing the tension ratcheting higher. Cameras panned across the set, capturing the hosts exchanging quick glances, attempting to gauge whether they were pushing too far or simply probing for honesty. Reba's composure was impeccable, but the subtle tightening of her jaw and the slight narrowing of her eyes betrayed a simmering frustration. One of the hosts, emboldened by the previous questions, pressed on. "Reba, critics argue that avoiding these topics makes you seem distant or disconnected. Don't you think your fans deserve honesty about everything?" Reba's gaze hardened. "Honesty doesn't mean surrendering every aspect of your life to public scrutiny," she said, her tone measured but cutting through the studio like a knife. "Fans respect authenticity, yes, but they also respect boundaries. I've spent my life performing, creating, and sharing parts of myself through music. That's where my honesty lies. It's not in answering every rumor or satisfying every curiosity about my personal life." The tension in the room was now unmistakable. The audience leaned forward, captivated, while the production crew behind the cameras exchanged urgent, subtle signals. Reba's composure had not wavered, but the energy in the studio had become almost suffocating. Every word, every glance, every small gesture was loaded with meaning, and it was clear that the exchange was approaching a critical moment. The host's next question landed like a spark in a powder keg. "Reba, there have been reports of disagreements with fellow artists and controversial moments in your career. Do you feel you need to address these publicly, or are you comfortable letting them slide?" Reba's eyes narrowed slightly, her lips pressing together in a line that conveyed both irritation and controlled fury. "I've built my career on my music, my dedication, and my integrity. I don't owe explanations for every rumor, every controversy, every misstep that's been sensationalized. I came here to talk about my work, my passion, my music, not to relive gossip for the sake of ratings." The host leaned in again, their voice intentionally probing, sharper now. "But Reba, in today's world, the audience expects openness. They want insight into your personal life, into your thoughts on issues beyond music. Isn't refusing to address these things a disservice?